Hello and welcome to a special edition of the 905er Roundup. When we stopped doing the weekly roundups a little while ago, we said we'd do them every now and again as need arose. And this week, need has arisen. So we're going to delay by a week the second part of our two-part investigation into homelessness in Ontario. And instead, we're going to talk today about the Auditor General's report into the provincial government's action towards the Greenbelt and the damning conclusions that she reached. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And well, Joel, do you want to kick off with kind of summary of where we are?
Basically, everything we thought was going on with this government, the Auditor General Bonnie Lysyk said was right. It was true. I'm going to summarize here a 95-page report as best I can, but basically, So the Greenbelt parcels of land that were freed up by the Ford government a little while ago were basically they're not needed to meet the housing targets of 1.5 million homes to be built that we need for the homeless housing crisis here in Ontario. She said explicitly, it's not needed. That Greenbelt opening was not needed. And how the opening was carried out is basically the heart of this, this scandal, in that essentially developers went with envelopes with detailed parcels of land that they were planning to buy to the chief of staff of the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Steve Clark, and said, basically, we want these plots of land to be freed up from Greenbelt regulations and scrutiny, because we're going to buy it. And literally within, I almost want to say the next day or a few months later, those are the parts of land that were freed up in this Greenbelt swap. The minister and Premier Ford have all said that they had no idea that this was happening. This was entirely the chief of staff of the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. This was completely his doing. He was directing staff underneath him, and the minister and the premier were completely caught unawares. But that's their story, and that's when they're sticking to it. Now, you think somebody's going to have to fall on their sword for this, and somebody's going to have to take the blame. Somebody's going to have to put in their resignation, and we're going to have to stop where we're going with the Greenbelt, and we're going to have to reevaluate that plan and maybe go a different route. No, none of that is happening. Nobody's getting fired. Nobody's losing their job. Nobody is resigning their ministership. Those parts of land are going to remain as they are. Nope. The Greenbelt is not going to be returned to as it was. This government is pressing on as if nothing happened, as if they did nothing wrong. I don't think the people of Ontario are going to buy this one way or another.
Well, I don't think the people of Ontario who've never liked Doug Ford are going to buy it, which was and always has been and always will be the majority of Ontarians as it happens. Just that same majority of Ontarians can't get their act together to vote for one party at an election time. It's exactly what we thought it was. And this, you used the word scandal. This is a scandal. And I'm using the word, making a point of highlighting that, because I try to avoid using words like scandal because it's too easy to say this is a scandal and this is a scandal, and start putting gate on the end of everything. And it's actually part of the problem we're seeing with the opposition being completely unable to make a major scandal stick. And I think, the press have had their day saying this is a disgraceful. The government will take a hit over this. But the government will also say, basically brush it under the carpet. The Premier had his press conference and kind of dissembled and distracted and took a pot shot at the Mayor of Burlington, which we'll get onto. Just basically everything other than accept any kind of level of responsibility or guilt whatsoever for what is the government doing deals for its friends that will make them billions of dollars. That's billions of dollars of corruption right there. That's billions of dollars.
8 billion. We know the number is potentially 8 billion. And also, I'm starting to interrupt, but I do want to underscore this. The Auditor General herself said that she was very conservative, no pun intended, on that estimate. She thinks it could be very much a higher value because she was using a model that was a few years ago. So we said 8 billion at least, probably a couple billion more.
And everybody knew, that Doug Ford knew, the minister Clark knew that this was going to be very controversial. It was a big chunk of Greenbelt, quite different from the tiny, small amounts of Greenbelt that the previous government had tinkered around with from time to time. They tried to equate the two, but baloney, that's not true. We're talking about thousands and thousands of acres here. There was no need for it unless you wanted your friends to get rich. That's the only reason to do this. There's no need in terms of planning. There's no need in terms of development. Despite the housing shortage, despite all those things that we talked about in our last episode about the need for housing, adding this land to the pool of land that's available to developers does nothing to accelerate development of housing and, above all, affordable housing in this province. All it does is harm the environment. All it does is make a load of fat developers who happen to be the biggest donors to the Progressive Conservative Party a lot fatter and a lot richer. It's corruption. It's a scandal. It should be the headline on the newspapers and the headline that the opposition is hammering on every day from now until the next election. And my prediction right now is that it won't be, that by the end of the week, no one will be talking about this anymore. Sure, it will come up, but it's not going to be the thing. It's not going to hang around the Premier's neck in the way it should. And part of the problem is this kind of situation where opposition parties spend all their time throwing words like corruption and a scandal around. And usually they're not actually scandals and they're not actually corruption. They're just incompetence, if you know, at worst. And so when you actually do get a real scandal with real harm being done, something that should go down in the history books as here was a government acting in an absolutely egregious way, our ears are already so kind of tired of hearing things like scandal and corruption and whatever. It's like, oh, it's just politicians being politicians. It's no big deal. That's we killed our own ability to convey the severity of a situation. And certainly the opposition parties seem completely bereft of ideas of how to make this stick. And it should stick. It really should stick.
I tweeted out when I was watching the press conferences, and then especially when Premier Ford stood up and failed to take responsibility for what happened. I said, this report, this is a government ender. Like this is one of those reports. This is, to me, I mean, if you look back even like in a recent history, and not totally, I mean, recent history in the province, reports like this are what end governments. The previous Liberal government was brought down by a number of different. I'm not going. You're right. I'm not going to use the word scandal, but just perceived incompetence or perceived poor decision making on their part. One of them was the gas plants, which I would say the gas plant scandal. And I dare anybody listening to say, tell me in 5 minutes what exactly was the malfeasance there. And what it comes down to is basically it was a bad decision on the part of the government.
Show me who got rich from the gas plant scandal.
Where was the enrichment? Who walked away with the billions of dollars in that scandal? Nobody. It was just a bad decision. And should they admit? I don't know. That's debatable. People aren't happy and that's the people are right in that regard. This is textbook scandal. Somebody went to this government and explicitly told them, and this wasn't a plan to help an industry. This wasn't an industry-wide policy to help grow or to meet a demand. This was a handful of people who, by the way, I believe one of them was also at the Doug Ford's daughter's stag and doe party that we all saw on the camera a few months ago. They went and said, no, we're buying these specific plots of land that are in the Greenbelt. It's cheap for us to do it now. I want you to free these up. You have to free these up from all restrictions so that I can make my money off of it. And this government basically said, okay, we're going to do it. And what I wanted to say is, it is the hypocrisy of this from the conservatives to get elected on, the liberals are so corrupt. The liberals are so corrupt. Liberals made bad decisions, and their time to go had come. Not going to argue with that. But this is corruption. This is evident that this government does not operate in the best interests of you or I, listener. You can have your thoughts about whether you need a more conservative, more right-wing point of view or attitude at the till. I get that, but this is clear. Their interests, when they sit down to make their decisions, the interests of Joe and Jane Front Porch are not at the forefront of their minds. Their interests are their donors, the people who are their friends, the billionaire friends that they have bought and paid for. This is a business. This is a racketeering business to them. This is the billionaire class, the elite class in this province have bought and paid the provincial conservative government to say, you do what we want you to do. Consequences be damned. I don't care who it helps. We want you to free up this plot of land, do it. We want you to sell off or allow us to operate this service or public good. You allow us to do it, and you allow us to turn it into a monopoly on the service. And this government says, okay, we'll do it. This is scandalous. This is the stuff that should be bringing down a government. And you're right, Roland. If the opposition parties cannot figure out a way to kick open the door and shine the light on what is going on here and make this into the issue and force some resignations, that we are deeply screwed in this province, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, it should be possible. It's always easier in a minority government, and the opposition parties under Tim Hudak had and Andrew Horwath did a much better job in a minority parliament situation, minority legislature situation, where they controlled the committees. And that part of the reason they got the gas plant story to hang around the Liberals for so long, because they just had these committee sessions for year after year after year, just digging over and digging it over, bringing it back into the headlines. Fine, that is easier to do when you control the committees. And in a majority situation, you don't control those committees. Nevertheless, it is possible to make stories stick. And you've got to, I mean, part of the problem with the NDP, it seems to me, is that they never know. They want to be everything to all men all the time, and they want to support every good cause, and very laudable. I'm not having a go at them for that. Unfortunately, politics is such a, and the attention you get in provincial politics is so limited that you've really got to have your one message, and it's, this government is corrupt. This government is putting money into the pockets of a handful of Vaughan developers. I mean, to use the words of Rob Burton from a few years ago, possibly before this government even existed. He may have actually said this under a Liberal government. I can't remember. But Ontario is run by and for a handful of Vaughan developers. Maybe we shouldn't mention Vaughan, but I mean, it just so happens that tends to be where an awful lot of developers are from. And it wasn't untrue under the previous government, but it's triply true now, that everything revolves around what those developers want. Everything they've ever asked for has been given to them with bells on since this government came into office.
And if you're, if right now the Liberals are having their leadership race, we've sat down with all the contenders, and I would dare say this should be leadership making material. Like you should be able to go in and start saying, this is it. This is what I'm doing. Day one, you elect me as premier. We're coming in. We're kicking open the door, and we're turfing these crooks out. And my worry is like the liberals are going to be afraid of doing it because they're going to say, "Oh, but everybody thinks we're crooked," and say, "No, this is scandals. This in my thinking, and I think this could be demonstrative, and I dare anyone to prove me otherwise. This might be the worst scandal in Ontario history, possibly even the country's, that a handful of individuals were able to get up to the premier's office to purposely change laws to benefit them directly. And it was collusion. That's what I wanted to try to emphasize. Like, this wasn't like we're going to let you know ahead of time we're planning to do this, or this wasn't some broad policy campaign promise that they're holding true to. This was a direct collusion. Somebody said, "No, we want you to do X, Y, and Z on this direct plot of land, and because we want to make money off of it." And they said, "Okay, this is I don't know if this is criminal. I think it's worth an investigation at the very least. But this is I cannot think of another textbook definition of criminal or of corruption and just insider collusion than this scandal. And this is what's going to be the benchmark for years to come."
And let's talk about the evidence for what we just alleged. Mm-hmm. So the government is perfectly at liberty to pass laws that make its supporters happy. It's nothing that's legal. You can do that.
That's what they get elected on.
Yeah. It's nice if you put it in your platform and everybody knows that it's coming, but ultimately they can pass laws
or mandate letters.
Yeah. They can pass laws that do treat certain sectors of society with favoritism, and it happens all the time. Every government does. The federal liberals, the prime minister was never stopped talking about how he was going to help the middle class. Well, screw the working class, I guess. But he was basically like, "I'm going to favor this sector of society," knowing that that's the sector of society that actually tends to vote and vote for him. You can do that. What you can't do is do what has happened here, in that people are basically given the nod. Make sure you own this piece of land by this day, because what we're going to do is going to increase the value of that land by millions and millions of dollars. It's going to go from basically a piece of green space that is of no value from a development point of view. All you can do is farm it or just let the grass grow on it because it's Greenbelt, to something that you can build high rises on or develop in whatever other way and make millions and millions of dollars. That is called insider trading when it happens in the stock market. And when it happens in the stock market, the people who do it go to prison. That passing of information, like, this is going to happen on this day.
Well, okay, just
make
just
sure
clarify,
that you buy.
That's not exactly what happened. It was a request of saying, "We're buying this land. You're going to change the rules to allow us to make billions of dollars." It was more direct than that. It wasn't even like the assumption was that of, "Oh, they're going to give the heads up." They didn't give the heads up. They were told by a handful of private entities, "Open up this plot of land. We've bought land here. You're going to open this up." And the government did that. That's so much dangerous. It tells me that this government does not listen to us, the people. They are in the pocket of special interest. They're literally in the pocket of billionaire developers. And that's where,
and depending on the timing of how the government communicated with those developers in that process of them saying, "We want this," because them saying "we want this" is one thing. There's nothing illegal about that.
Yeah, everybody says they want something. Yeah.
If the government then says, we're minded to do that, so you want to make sure that and the Toronto Star has done the study that's looking at the dates of when lands were being purchased, when lands were changing hands, around the time that this decision was being made. That suggests, well, that is certainly something that if I was working for the OPP, I would want to look into more and very carefully.
Right. I am, even if nothing, if this falls short of the criminality charge, who knows, it might. I don't know. This does fall short. I think at the very least, you can make the definitive statement that this is not a government for the people, as Doug Ford claims it is. It is for private business and private interests, and they're the ones who get their seat at the table, and they're the ones who get the invite to the back room to have that private discussion, and we're left with the collateral. We are collateral damage in this government. I also said this behavior makes me say, well, before we get onto that, I think we should go into him throwing the mayor of Burlington under the bus.
You looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.
Which I thought was, if you saw the Doug Ford press conference trying to defend his actions, I thought he was all over the place in his response. It was clear they were trying to grasp some kind of defense for this. They were caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and they're trying to figure out, how do we defend ourselves? And in the course, they're trying to do the Pierre Poilievre defense of, oh, this is, the cost of living has gone up. This is going to help bring down the cost of living, your cost of groceries and cost of energy, and all this stuff is going to bring it down. No, it won't. It's not going to do anything to that effect. And then to say, well, we're in a housing crisis, so we need to build housing. And basically saying this, without being too short, municipalities are not holding up their end of the bargain to meeting these housing targets that the province imposed on them. And he targeted Burlington. He singled out Burlington as being a city that is not meeting its targets. Now, in his defense, somewhat, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation did put out the new start numbers. They're around public data if anybody wants to see it. And Burlington is, I think, like second from the bottom of a list of all municipalities in Ontario for new housing starts. That's a problem, yes, but I think it's a complicated issue.
It's an issue with a lot of history, and we can get onto that.
I think that's an entire other episode. I think is that there's so much there, and for him to throw it off like it's basically just like Burlington sitting around twiddling their thumbs is a bit disingenuous. Now, we asked, for all transparency, we did ask the mayor to come on the podcast to just say, like, do you want to respond? She declined but she did put out a statement, said that she'll stand by the statement. Basically, there was one little bit here that I think was interesting to be stated. She said, Burlington Council has unanimously accepted our pledge to issue 29,000 permits for new builds by 2031. And our city already has 25,000 units and growing in the development pipeline. We are willing to work with the development industry to help enable them to get shovels in the ground. I mean, that sounds promising. It does sound okay. Work is being done. Burlington's not just twiddling their thumbs and looking at the sky in this. I do think it comes down to the fact that this government does not have a credible plan other than just, whatever the development industry comes to us and says they want us to do, that's what we're going to do under the guise of building. There is no plan here. There's no actual incentives to tell developers, no, you're not just sitting on plots of land because you got permits 10, 15 years ago. You're waiting for the market opportunity to start building. There's no incentives to do that. There is no pressure to do that. There is no pressure of just saying cities can't allow for that middle density. That would solve so much of the planning clog in not just Burlington, I'm sure, but all the municipalities in the 905 in Ontario, to allow a variety of housing units to be built to meet these targets. That's not being addressed by this provincial government.
I mean, there were some changes in that regard, but I mean, they're still basically hammering on the issue of downtown development and sprawl. Burlington can't sprawl because it's already built out. Sprawl is really off the table, apart from a couple of patches. And like every other city in Burlington, there are approvals sitting on the books that have been sitting on the books for years that developers have in their back pockets that they are not putting into action. Approval's been done by previous mayors, by previous councils, have been done by this mayor or this council. I imagine part of the picture, I don't know how the Canadian Mortgage and Housing people, which is a developer lobby group, by the way, these are not independent people, they are very much the kind of organization that lobbies on behalf of the development industry. I don't know how they calculated this. It may have something to do with the freeze on approvals and freeze on approvals, not on building, I should say, that happened after this Mayor Mead Ward came into office. It actually doesn't slow down development much at all. It just means that the process of getting appealed to the Ontario, whatever the hell it is these days, Ontario Land Tribunal, kind of gets accelerated. So, the one thing that no council in Ontario has the power to do is stop development. They can reject applications, but this council hasn't even really been taking on or voting on any applications because of the interim control bylaw that they put in place. They've just been kind of shelving them and then letting the process go on without them. What that eventually means is that in terms of their voting on development applications, it all happens in private in kind of deals with the land tribunal. We're getting into the weeds here, I appreciate, but I mean it is kind of important to make the key point that no council anywhere can just stop development and like halt the development process. They can't. They have to. They are legally bound to act in certain ways when development applications come along. And believe me, there are people who would love to have the ability to stop developments, but they don't have that power. They cannot act unreasonably. They cannot act outrageously because the land tribunal will simply throw it all in the garbage.
Well, the question that we've always asked is, tell me of a municipality that has successfully halted a development project. I always say that about the kind of NIMBY argument. It's like all these NIMBYs who are meant to be stopping developments. And it's like, show me the NIMBY who has actually ever stopped anything. Right. They may halt it, they may delay it, they may create a whole lot of stink. If the developer wants something built, the developer will get something built. Because they have the right to build. It's written into the legislation. Right. So if things aren't being built, if houses aren't being built, it's nothing to do with the mayor of Burlington or the Burlington Council or any other council stopping that from happening. It's because of all the other issues that are underway. And it comes down also to the size and shape of the municipality. Burlington doesn't have a lot of green space. It only has downtown. And it also comes down more than anything to developers choosing when they want to develop. And I could name you developments in Burlington that are not being developed. I can name you housing estates, which would be more at the affordable end of the market, where the developer came back year after year after year, getting extensions and to the approval for decades. Right, getting extensions to an approval that he was sitting on and not building. I would just. I do want to point out a distinction that Premier Ford, just before he was bashing Burlington as a city that's failing his targets that he's imposed on the city, he was praising Brantford as a city that is surpassing its building targets, and they are according to the criteria. However, I did happen to drive through Brantford this past weekend on my way through there. And if you've ever been to Brantford, folks, I'm sure you have, there's a lot of open land around it. They have not hit their green wall I don't think they're in the green
Well, they're
belt.
beyond it. So
they're beyond
they don't
it.
have that problem at all.
They don't have it. And they have a lot of development going on because they just have a lot of flat land on the outskirts that just keep sprawling out. Now, Brantford is a smaller community. They could probably afford to do that for the time being. But it's a bit of an apples and oranges situation. Burlington does not have that luxury of saying, well, we'll just keep on building out. Burlington has hit that wall along with a lot of cities in the 905. It's not just a Burlington problem. They're hitting that Greenbelt wall.
Oh, and for 20 years, successive Ontario governments, including this government for the first 4 years that they were the government, have been banging on and on and on about the need to not go out, to go up, to intensify. And that was the right thing to do. It caused various problems, which Marianne Mead-Ward could talk about all day. But nevertheless, that was still ultimately the right thing. This government, 2 years ago, or even a year ago, really, threw that entire history into the garbage, said, you know what, let's just sprawl anyway.
Right.
And without any consultation, without any consideration, without any planning is what they've done. And it's ridiculous and it's wrong. And you can't criticize the cities for still trying to go, well, hang on a minute, you were telling us to do this for the last 20 years. That's kind of what we're geared up to do.
But here's the thing, like we're here, we've talked with a number of people across the board, from homeless advocates to economists and to politicians. They're all saying, yeah, we're willing to intensify, to build up. But right now, the game in Ontario is you're either building a high rise or you're building sprawl. There is no flexibility to say, okay, let's build communities that we can all be proud of and live in, and fit the people that we know need to be housed there in a comfortable, lovely home that they can be proud of, they can be safe in, they can be part of the community, they are included into it. And we aren't, this government has not approached that. It is literally, they need to change the rules of how we build. We need to start thinking differently in terms of how we build these cities. And this provincial government has not given the cities the tools to say, okay, here are your targets that we think you need to hit to meet this 1.5 million homes by 2030. They're staying, build it underneath the old regime. The tools that were left to you for a 1930s, a post-war economy, when the idea was, okay, the 905 is nothing but suburbs and everybody's going to commute into Toronto for their jobs. That era has ended. It ended years ago. We need something new. And this government does not want to do the hard work of passing the necessary legislation to give the cities the democracy and the tools that they need to build into the cities of the 21st century.
Yeah, and one thing it has done, just pick up one point there, is it has given them targets. It's basically said to Burlington, you've got to build 290,000 units, I guess, houses of whatever kind.
Well, 29,000 permits.
Yeah, which is ludicrous. The city doesn't have the power to build a matchbox in terms of development until someone comes and says, I'd like to build a matchbox. Everything is about demand that comes from people who want to develop land coming to the city. The city can certainly aid the process in various ways, but it has no initiative in this business at any point. It can only react to what other people are doing. So this idea, I mean, the biggest lie about this whole situation is that the councils, and this is just the conservative mentality throughout. Basically, they cannot believe in government having any purpose. If they could, they would just abolish the whole damn thing. But the only reason they keep it around is because they have to. And they think that, the reason we're not getting houses built is because of these damn councils standing in the way, because of all this red tape, blah, 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 blah. And it's just not true. It's simply not true.
What the sad thing is, the Auditor General, before this report, released another kind of damning, scathing report that this province has been hoarding away billions of dollars that they had previously promised to be spent on various government projects or promises that they said, but they've just been squirreling it away for we don't know what. So, I mean, in theory, they're sitting on this wealth of cash that is not being spent on schools, not being spent on our hospitals, not being spent on infrastructure. And I say, okay, that's scandalous in itself, but why not then just say, well, let's just build a bunch of housing. Let's go in and start building in.
Because they don't believe it's
Well, I
the
know,
job of government to do any such
right.
thing. I can tell you exactly what that money will be used for. It will be used for a bribe at the next election that will be given to the middle class and the wealthy as a tax cut, because that's their entire raison d'etre. It's like the purpose is to do as little as possible and to give money back to the people who need it the least. That's every conservative government in the Western world, certainly that I've ever come across. Yep. And certainly this one. I mean, they're utterly bereft of any kind of idea. I mean, we saw today Jack Siegel died, the conservative former
Hugh Siegel.
Sorry, not Jack Siegel. Hugh Siegel, yeah. Former senator, former chief of staff to Brian Mulroney, someone who I learned about first from liberals and from progressive politicians because he was so well loved, working across ideas. Someone who supported and worked on the basic income pilot with the Ontario Liberals, a genuine cross-boundaries progressive conservative, with ideas, with intelligence, and with a certain amount of, with a great deal, from what I've heard, I've never met him, great deal of gravitas and ability to work across genuinely work across party lines, rather than talk about working across party lines, which is what usually happens. This government has nobody remotely approaching that. No. They have no ideas. They exist simply to line the pockets of their supporters, and they don't believe it's their job to do things to make the world better, because they don't believe that's what government is there for.
I just want to, I'd like to, I was coming up on our time here, and I just want to kind of close off on this idea is that I would argue that this progressive conservative party is not even a government. It's not even a political party anymore. It's a grift machine. It is nothing more than a vehicle for a select few individuals to pilfer the public coffers and get rich doing it. We're seeing it right now. This is what happened. And then what I mean by a machine is they even have their own spin doctors at the end. And I want to take a shot at Brian Lilly, who wrote this unbelievable column in the Toronto Sun, basically saying, oh, nothing to see here, folks. This is a tempest in a teapot. His words, not mine. Just go on about your business. Nothing to see here. And I thought, you cheeky bastard, for not seeing this for what it is. Like you of all people who are the clinging to conservative ideals and believe in conservatism, and you're looking at they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and you're going to defend this as a nothing to see here. And I said, James Ford's name to Trudeau. My God, we would never stop hearing about this from you, Brian. You are a hypocrite to the nth degree on this, and your spots are showing clearly. But I mean, that's what it is. It's clearly like somebody has in mind, okay, tell us what you want us to do. We'll do it. And we're going to have our arm of post-media flunkies. Because the other thing is Doug Ford also got to write an op-ed in the National Post defending his actions, which I've never seen happen before. I've never seen a premier getting an op-ed after a scandal to defend their actions. That I thought was outrageous. And that's what conservative politics, I think, in this country, or at least in this province, is a select few private interests get to control the levers of power. We get to pilfer the public dollars, whether that's we're going to privatize healthcare. We're going to make it so we get to steal all the nurses and the doctors from the public sector, and we employ them in a private clinic that's going to be crappily run, and we're going to charge you a boatload of money, and somehow we'll put it on an app so it'll be great for you. And we're going to make billions of it. And when people say, hey, this doesn't work, we think this is wrong, we're going to get our lackeys in post-media news network to say, no, nothing to see here, folks. Go on about your business. here's a tax cut coming, and oh yeah, it's actually those blasted liberals' fault, even though they haven't been in power for 8 years.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's just my that's
I mean,
that's my rant of what we're getting hosed on in this province. I'm a little testy on this.
No, it's ultimately the biggest problem of all is the inability of our political class and of our media, what's left of the media, to hold any level of government to account, particularly at provincial levels. I mean, the provincial legislature, in all honesty, I mean, I thought this when I was involved with politics and when I was involved with one of the parties that was actually in government, the Ontario legislature is a terrible joke of a legislature. The MPPs have no power. They are basically functionless drones who vote how they're told. There's no such thing as a backbench rebellion in Canada, as far as I'm aware, which happens in other parts of the world.
Look at the UK.
Yeah, and I never thought that
their backbench turfed 3 prime ministers all in one term.
I mean, the backbenches, the Conservative backbenches in particular, have kind of driven the government agenda for the last 30 years, really, in many ways. Mm-hmm. in the UK. That's not necessarily a good thing because Brexit came right out of those backbenches, but nevertheless, that's democracy. You know, that's
you're not going to. You know what? You're right. You want to see that in Ontario in the legislature, progressive, conservative, liberal, or NDP. That will never happen.
So it should. When this kind of thing happens, when something so, like I say, clearly egregious, it's kind of, we all knew what was happening. The Auditor General has just spelled it out for us in words and in the words of a person who kind of has to be listened to. But we all knew that was what happened. There's no surprise here. And in a decent Ontario, there would be newspapers that would be doing a lot better than the Star is doing at just holding the government to account, better than we're doing at holding the government to account. And there would be opposition parties that would be making hay out of this in an effective way, who would be, behaving in the legislature in a way that is actually worth quoting in the news, that will be threatening. There will be backbenchers with enough honor to say, this is not good. I cannot support a leader who behaves this way. And it's my job to put pressure on my own leader to make some kind of apology, to change things. And there's a lot of things short of a resignation, and there's a lot of things short of calling the police, which is what the opposition always goes to. It's like, let's call the police. It should be that MPPs have enough power that they can hold their own leaders to account and say, hey, you really screwed up here. This makes me look bad. This is not on. You need to change this. You need to backtrack on those development agreements. You need to take that land back out of the Greenbelt. But, are we seriously suggesting that the PC backbenchers are going to do that? No, of course not. There's not a single one of them that's worth the time of day. No. On that note, I think we'll call this one to an end. But this story's not going to end. I just think there's more. This is an onion. There's more layers to be peeled back here, and then none of it's going to make us happy or relieved when it happens. So we will follow it as it unfolds. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care, and we'll be back next week with more of the 905er. Bye-bye. All right.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns, or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.